Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, today's show we discuss the top 100 flex rankings for 2023, and we are going to compare them to current ADP. We're going to give you 3 buys and 3 sells. We're going to discuss players like Joe Mixon, James Conner, Michael Pittman, and more. Find out on today's show if they are a buy or sell. Before we do, make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com and check out all the articles you need to win your fantasy team. But today's show is the 100 flex rankings starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And if I was to put a flex rankings for like Razzball people, I would have to say, DT, you're a first round pick. I don't know if I can put you ahead of Gray at 1, but you might be in the top 3. So I'm glad you're on the show today to talk top 100 flex rankings. What's going on, DT?
Yeah, I like to think of myself as more of like a former first rounder I'm more of like an Adrian Peterson. People just like keep expecting him to fade away. I didn't beat any children, but other than that, I think the similarities are all there.
I'm glad nothing's changed. DT, it's been a while since you've been on the show, so I'm glad you gave us that life update. We're glad you still haven't done that to any children. I'm very happy you came in hot to start the show. I love it. Well, today's show, we're going to be breaking down the top 100 flex rankings. I will leave a link to the description, and a link to the article in the description of my 100 flex rankings. But today's show, we're going to compare it to ADP, give you 3 buys and 3 sells. And I'll tell you this first draft is rough. I'll tell you right now, I'm already updating it, and I'm already not excited, but just for the sake of the show, I kept it as is. But I already have updates starting that are going to drop next week for that top 100 flex rankings. DT, I just want to ask you a quick question. There's an early run on wide receivers early on in the ADP that I've seen. Jefferson, Chase, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp are 4 of the first 6 picks. Do you agree with that to start off the show, or do you find yourself maybe leaning a running back here and there early in the top 5 or 6?
Yeah, I've always been a little bit more. I guess I shouldn't say always. When zero RB first came along, I did jump on that bandwagon like pretty early, but that was a very small period of my fantasy life. So I've tended to try to go running back early. That said, full PPR, like I think that it's very wise to grab one of those wide receivers if you can early. There's a lot of uncertainty in the running back ranks this year, outside of the top few. I agree with where these guys are going.
Yeah, we got like Bijan Robinson already in the top 5 running backs, and he's, a lot of excitement around him too. But let's talk a little bit about the 3 buys and the 3 sells that I have from ADP. And the first one I want to talk about is a buy, and it's Joe Mixon. And I got to tell you, his ADP makes 0 sense. It doesn't make it. I understand that we're all disappointed. Last year, Joe Mixon was the most disappointing, like top 10 running back I've ever seen in my life. I think a lot of people, including myself, had really high expectations for him. But unfortunately, whether you liked it or not, he still finished in the top 10, and he was still pretty consistent. I know he had one monster game, but just to break down his ADP versus my rank. So Joe Mixon overall right now today is going 49th overall. I have him all the way up at 28. His running back rank positional, I have him at 14. His flex ADP, positional ADP is 18. Now, that's not a big difference for the running backs, but you'll notice that's a 20 position gap between Mixon, where he's going in my rankings, versus where he's going in ADP. Now, the reason why I have this in my mind is, number one, just look at his last season, okay? Last season, he was the RB6 in PPR points per game. Games over 50% of the snaps without his monster game, because obviously he had this one huge game where he had 4 touchdowns, 150 yards. And I wanted to be completely honest with everybody about his actual finish, because that one game really did drive him up the ranking. He still finished RB13. If you take out that monster game, he was still the RB13 in fantasy football. So pushing him down further doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you why. No changes to anything around him, okay? Like, he's got the same coaching staff. He's got Joe Burrow. He's got a good receiving core, a good offense. And the only thing that really has changed is that Samaje Perine is gone. And that, if anything, his position is more solidified without Perine there. And so I looked at the games where Samaje Perine did not play at least 30% of the snaps. So last year, P. Ryan kind of had this mixed role where his playing time fluctuated. So he played 6 games under 30% of snaps last year. Mixon averaged 20 PPR points per game. 5 of the 6 games were in double-digit fantasy points. 4 of the 6, he had at least 12 fantasy points. So very consistent when P. Ryan was not on the field much. And now P. Ryan is gone. So I love that for his fantasy football outlook this season. Consistency-wise, I know last year we think about that big game, but he was 8th in RB1 games last year. Half his games were RB1 performances. That's at least 14 PPR points per game. So he was super consistent. The offensive line is shaking up a little bit. They are returning 3 of 5 starters. Looks like Jonah Williams is moving to right tackle, Orlando Brown the left tackle, but it seems like they invested again in the offensive line. So, DT, explain to me why you think people might be lower on ADP, or do you agree with me he should be a little bit higher?
I agree with you. I agree with you on this one for sure. Yeah, Mixon is a guy that I was always skeptical of early on in his career, but last year I really came around on him. He was a guy I owned on several teams last year. I don't get it. Joe Burrow and like the emergence of the Bengals offense as a kind of superpower is really what turned me around on Mixon. You know, the opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to score have obviously become a lot more prevalent for him in that offense since Joe Burrow came around. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just like the shine has worn off. It is really strange because you said like ADP 49 or something like that, and I think you're talking about just flex, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
said what, like 56? We're talking about 6th round pick for a guy that, I mean, he could easily return first round value. I don't understand it either. I love it. I mean, their offensive line is not like top tier, right? But it's still middle of pack in the NFL, maybe slightly above average. So, and you got all those weapons around. There's going to be big games, right?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I think he's going to be, once you get closer to August, there are going to be some readjustment on his ADP, but you're probably going to get him in the 3rd round at the even probably no later than the 2-3 turn, and you're getting a steal. And that makes me feel more comfortable drafting guys like wide receivers early because I could take a Cooper Kupp with the 3rd, 4th pick and then go around and get Joe Mixon later. All about that. All right, I'm going to talk about another guy that I really like is James Conner. I've been on the James Conner kind of bandwagon for the last few years. Down the stretch of last season, like typically when a guy dominates down the stretch, you see a huge spike in his ADP the next year. Well, James Conner, no one wants him. I don't know why, but currently today his ADP is 65th overall amongst wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. I have him all the way up at 36 in my flex rankings. His RB 17 in my rankings, he's going RB 26. Last year he was the RB 9. Okay, I understand Kyler Murray's banged up. I understand they have a new coaching staff coming in, but when you really look at the situation, I think Kyler Murray's injury might actually help James Conner just a little bit because if he's less mobile, he might check down a little bit more to his running backs. Might help him there because we know the mobile quarterbacks don't check down to their running backs as much. But let's forget all that. Let's think about Drew Petzing, the new OC. Drew Petzing over the last 8 seasons, okay, he's been under the Minnesota and Cleveland coaching staff. So this guy came in under Kevin Stefanski, the RB1 opportunities. So carries and targets, 311 on average per season for the 8 seasons he was on a coaching staff. Every single year you look at it, from Adrian Peterson, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, even the off seasons with like Latavius Murray, for example, and Jerick McKinnon, when you average those out, that's 311 opportunities for the RB1 in that offense. That would have been 9th in the NFL last year. That's exactly what you want for an RB1 or an RB2 in your offense, a high volume role. Okay. The offensive line returning 3 of 5 starters. They drafted a kid in the 1st round. They also drafted a kid in the 4th round who's already taken snaps at the center. So they might have 2 rookies along with their 3 starters. I don't care for that, but it is what it is. I think Paris Johnson could be really solid for them. But competition, he's got 3 UDFAs and a 6th round pick in Ingram. Okay. So where is the competition coming from? Like, honestly, this coaching staff has used RB1s. And on top of all that, there is zero competition. They didn't bring anybody in. So why can't Conner be a stud, focal point of this offense in 2023? DT, what do you think? Do you think you lean more on the ADP side or are you more on my side in the rankings?
This one I'm more on the ADP side. He's more of a guy that, like, if he falls, and I'd probably be wanting him to fall below ADP, to be honest, just because of the risk concerns that you outlined around the offense as a whole. I'm a huge Kyler Murray fan. I always have been one of the biggest Kyler Murray fans, but we don't. He's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season, right? We don't know what his mobility is going to be like coming off of the ACL injury. So I think that Kyler being mobile is a huge factor in their offense and the run game, right? It opens up opportunities for Connor in the past, and they don't have Hopkins anymore. It's like, where are the weapons here to complement a James Conner? You got Hollywood Brown and Rondell Moore or Greg Dortch. This is not. This could be really ugly for the Cardinals offense. There might not be a whole lot of scoring opportunities, and I know we say Keontae Ingram's a 6th-round pick, but like stranger things have happened. We have all kinds of undrafted free agent running backs that turn into really good fantasy players and really good weapons for teams. So stranger things have happened than a guy like Keontae Ingram of coming in and sharing the workload and taking over. Connor could get banged up. He isn't exactly. I think he's turning 28 years old or something this year. So don't hate him, but I'm not excited either. So I'm more on the ADP side.
That hurts, but that's okay. 1 out of 2 so far, not bad. Let's jump down to number 3 on this one. It's Isaiah Hodgins. And for my first 100 flex, I got to admit, he's number 100. Okay, I put him in because I wanted to get. I'm buying Brian Daboll, I'm buying Daniel Jones, and I'm buying the Giants offense in the second year of this offense. And Hodgins, currently today, I have him at 100 in my flex. He was going 175th in flex rankings on ADP. 40, I have him at wide receiver 48, and he was going wide receiver 84. Now, I understand there's a lot of uncertainty, and this is one of those rankings where if we start hearing noise that Paris Campbell's emerging as the number 1, then I'll flip it. If you start hearing that, Hodgins isn't running with the ones, we'll flip it, obviously. But just from his actual game last year. So first of all, I wanted to double check, and Matt Harmon did a reception perception on him, and I always bring him up because Matt Harmon actually looks at how he wins routes, and he actually said he was doing pretty good. He's very good against press. A little weaker against zone versus man. He says that maybe long-term he's better as a big, powerful slot guy, but overall he's still competitive and he's still good. So I was like, okay, that gives me some confidence that, Isaiah Hodgins can earn his number 1 spot. But even when you start factoring in all the players on the team, and I brought this up earlier in the offseason, Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Jamison Crowder, there's not a lot of big physical receivers on this football team other than Darren Waller now. And I think that Isaiah Hodgins could fill that role in the red zone. But just last season, the last 7 games that he played, where he played over 75% of the snaps, became the full-time starter, essentially. He averaged 10.4 PPR points per game. That would have been wide receiver 48, right in line with my ADP that I have him right now. He had 5 of the 7 games, including the playoffs, he played 75% of the snaps. He had 11 PPR points per game. That's solid wide receiver 4 numbers. So I think that there is a really good shot for him to come in and probably be that number 1 outside threat for Daniel Jones and company. But DT, what do you think? Are you leaning undraftable, or are you leaning that you'll take a flyer on Isaiah Hodgins in 2023?
Well, I guess a couple things here. First of all, you're the local Giants expert, so part of me has got to defer to you here in this department here on the Giants. But there is a lot to like when you start looking under the hood on Hodgins and how he finished last season. I'm a big fan. I know you are too, of looking at that trend in the second half of the season, or even the last third or last quarter of the season, how a guy finished, how he was being used. Daniel Jones actually looked really good in the playoffs last year, right? Hodgins had 12 targets in week 14. He caught 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. I know you were kind of shouting about him last year. So like you said, there's not a whole lot of competition there. I mean, there is a lot of competition, but not like these guys are scary. So it seems like he is, I don't know if we're going to say locked in, but it's looking really good for him to have a nice workload at this point in the preseason. I'm with you. I'm in on Hodgins, especially at that ADP, right? It's like you can take a last round flyer on this guy in a lot of leagues. And what is the risk there? I mean, look at the alternatives. It's like, why not, right? Absolutely.
That's kind of what my thought process was. When I slipped him in at 100, I'm like, why not? I know, and it's early. It's not. It was like May. Like I'm not holding anything. My feet are not to the fire right now. And like I said, as a Giants fan, I'm a little more interested in seeing some success for the team, and I do think he wants to be good. I do think he will be good. But let's jump into some sells. Let's take a trip to Negative Town and talk about some guys I'm not high on. And the first guy I want to talk about is Michael Pittman Jr. And so right now today, his flex rank in ADP is 42. So he's 42 overall. I have him at 59. His wide receiver positional rank is 23. I have him at 28. So I'm 5 spots lower at wide receiver. Last year, he was the wide receiver 20. And I understand last year was a disaster with Matt Ryan and company, and it was not good. And I know there's a lot of excitement around Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen coming in, but there's a lot of change. I don't love change for receivers when you have a new quarterback, a new coach. There's going to be everyone's learning a new system on top of learning new players, like new quarterback. I mean, Gardner Minshew, of course, played under Shane Steichen, but Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman are learning a new playbook. I think that's going to cause some delay in the progress, but really it comes down to rookie quarterbacks. So I looked at this over the last 5 seasons. There were 16 rookie quarterbacks that started through at least 250 pass attempts in a season their rookie year. Okay, 16 rookie quarterbacks over the last 5 years to attempt at least 250 passes. They produced 1 top 12 wide receiver and 3 top 24 wide receivers. So that means only 19% of the rookie quarterbacks produced a top 24 wide receiver on a PPR points per game basis. That's not good. That is not something that I'm interested in. That's 7 times lower than their veteran counterparts. So you're close to 7 times more likely to get a wide receiver 2 in fantasy football if you fade a team with a rookie quarterback. And I actually wanted to I took this a step further and I thought, well, what if the teams just had no receivers? What if it's like a rookie comes in and he's got no weapons and they didn't have weapons last year? Well, 8 of the 16 teams had a top 24 wide receiver the year prior. So it drops from 8 to 3. That's a pretty significant drop. That's over a 50% drop in wide receiver 2s on these teams. So that's why I'm not excited about Michael Pittman. But DT, give me your thoughts. Are you in on Pittman where he's currently going? Or are you going to kind of be fading more like I am?
Pittman is one that I am actually in on, Bobby. I hear what you're saying on quarterback, but I'm a Minshew fan. I've been a Minshew guy. Love the stash. No, he's just a gutsy quarterback, and I think that he'll end up being the guy. At least that's my premise here. If it is Richardson, then I think you've kind of got me sold on that argument. But I think Minshew can get the ball to Pittman. Pittman is going back to the Hodgins argument, right? How he finished the season. Pittman finished strong. He was banged up a lot in the middle of the year, but he finished well. He's a physical threat. And I think Minshew gets him the ball. Again, there's not a whole lot of competition out there for the targets. I think Pittman can be a bona fide elite wide receiver. So the risk of the reward at the age in the draft, I'll take that.
Break it up a little bit. All right. Yes. All right. I lost you a little bit towards the end there. Well, yeah, I think if it's Gardner, yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, you're in and out a little bit. Gardner Minshew, in my opinion, yes, this all changes. If it's Minshew, I'm back in. So I think it really depends. Watch the camp reports. We saw DJ Chark have a really nice season with Gardner Minshew as the full-time starter, but I do think at some point in the year you're probably going Anthony Richardson, and that's why I had the benchmark so low at 250, because that means that half the season's probably the rookie, half the season's the veteran, and when you figure it out at the end, it's probably not going to meet ADP, but that's still a good point. All right, let's jump down to the next one, and it's Devonta Smith. So I wanted to take a look. So Smith currently today is going wide receiver 12. I have him at wide receiver 20. I have him closer to 41st in my flex rankings versus 22nd in ADP. So he's this 22nd wide receiver, tight end, running back going off the boards currently right now in ADP. So the first thing I want to bring up is that Dallas Goedert injury helped Devonta Smith last year. So the games where he only averaged 14.8 PPR points per game in the games with Dallas Goedert. That would have been wide receiver 18, probably closer in line with my actual analysis here. But if you look at value-based drafting, so what I did is I wanted to take kind of what Pro Football Reference does, and I actually did it for PPR, and I adjusted the metrics a little bit to show versus top 24 running backs versus top 36 wide receivers, top 12 tight ends, top 12 quarterbacks. So a player versus those actual positions. So if I want to see how much of a difference maker Devonta Smith was when Dallas Goedert played last year. So he averaged 2.3 PPR points per game more than the wide receiver 36. That would have been overall rank 42nd. So that's right in line with my flex ranking. So he's only giving you 2.3 more points than his uh, replacement level player. And that's wide receiver. That would have been wide receiver 19 in that metric. So I might be a little low on him. I might bump him up in my next round, but I'd not much higher. DT, quick thoughts about Smith. Do you think him, AJ Brown, and company are going to take another step this season with Jalen Hurts? Or do you kind of view him more of a mid-range wide receiver too?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick here because I don't know if you're hearing what I'm saying, if my internet or your internet
You're good.
is choppy here. But good. You get here now. I'm here liking this guy because he's proved me wrong before. I don't want to doubt him too much, but yeah, this is a good offense. There should be opportunity, but I think he might end up being number 4 option, right? Like they got a really good offensive line. I think Swift is going to get a lot of work there. Maybe even the 5th option, right? Because you've got Jalen Hurts wheels to deal with too. So I think it's between him and Goddard, and as you said, it may go the big man's way. So I'm not going to draft him where he's going. If he falls a little bit, maybe I'll think about him on one team. But he's a guy that I'm okay missing on. I think there's some risks there that you've outlined pretty well here.
All right, let's jump down to my last one. This is probably the one I'm the biggest on. It's Kyle Pitts. We talked a little bit about him the other day about why we're kind of selling his ADP. Currently, he's going tight end 5. I'm at tight end 9, but his overall flex ranking right now, his flex ADP is 58. I have him at 90. I just don't see him becoming. I understand he's got all the talent in the world, but the biggest issue that we talked about in our last episode was that he's not a plus blocker right now in the NFL, and that has prevented him from being a full-time player. Plus, he's coming off an MCL surgery. I know that's not a big injury, but it's still impactful for his offseason and stuff like that. And on top of that, they brought in Jonnu Smith because I think there was some hesitation. They brought in Jonnu Smith to diversify the offense a little bit. They could run 2 tight end sets more with Jonnu and him on the field. I understand that might not impact Kyle Pitts, but not every NFL team. The best NFL teams maybe run 50% 2 tight end sets. They don't run it as their base offense in 75, 80% of the offense. So that's going to be impactful there to his overall. But last season, he was the tight end 22 in PPR points per game for tight ends. Okay, Desmond Ridder last year in his couple starts averaged 177 passing yards. Now, I'm not saying he can't improve on that, but at the same time, it's not a very good starting point for this season. They have the top run game offensive line in football, and Arthur Smith. By the way, I've heard this is what Dan Orlovsky and a couple other people have said, that Arthur Smith is a run game guru. He is like the Kyle Shanahan of the NFC in Atlanta. He's got that level of chops in the run game. And I think when you go get Bijan Robinson, they're just going to lean into this even more. On top of all that, Desmond Ridder's mobile. They're going to use his legs as well. Then you got Drake London. They added some competition with Jonnu Smith and Matt Collins, who, by the way, Matt Collins, 7th highest PFF run blocking grade for wide receivers last year. They're just leaning into this more. I think Bijan Robinson, there's also a correlation between running back and tight end targets. And I think Bijan's going to impact him more. Guys like Tyler Algier were not getting that many targets last year. You might see more gore towards Bijan, which is going to impact Kyle Pitts. So I actually have him closer to 10 in my tight end rankings. The ADP has him at 5, going probably right in that 6th round. DT, what's your thoughts about Kyle Pitts?
I think somewhere in between on Pitts versus where you're at and where ADP is at. I don't hate that area to draft him just because we know like the upside is to the moon if he does break out. He can be. I don't know if a tight end is ever a league winner other than Darren Waller was as close as it gets, right? When you were able to get him like in the late rounds. But I think a mid-round tight end is typically not a league winner. Maybe when you got Kelsey, like before he broke out, and Gronk, that type of thing. But the upside is there. The offense, they got a surprisingly good offensive line, right? Young quarterbacks, they tend to like to go to the big man as kind of a safety blanket. So I think it's team dependent for me is what it comes down to. And he'd probably need to fall a little bit from ADP, but we're looking at him in, the Dallas Goedert area. Darren Waller, I like him with those guys. I think that's probably the right group. It just depends on your draft, right? Like I'm probably addressing running back and wide receiver needs in that area of the draft. And if one of those guys falls, then I'll take him a couple rounds later, kind of a thing. So it's not necessarily that I'm averse to Pitts. I like the upside, and I like taking upside shots on guys like him. It's just I think that that's a little bit early for that.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all we got today, folks. This is our first edition of the 100 Flex Rankings, ADP's buys and sells. Make sure you check out the Razzball.com site. We'll be dropping the top 100 flex. I'll be updating it constantly at this point. Every time I look up a player, I'm like, I got to go higher or lower. I have players right now in that 100 Flex Rankings DT full disclosure that I'm like, what the blank was I thinking when I put this together? So I already got major updates coming. Yeah, it's 100%. But DT, man, honestly, tell the people, like, I know you got your rankings coming out soon. Do you want to, I know, make sure you follow you at Donkey Teeth 87. Anything upcoming people could be looking out for in the next few weeks?
Yeah, you just got some rankings that I put together like 6 weeks ago and never released. So, I got 6 yards of mulch in the driveway. I think once I get through that, then it's all systems go. I got a dynasty rookie draft with some of the industry guys that the Razzball Best Ball Dynasty leagues that we're running. I got to get those rookie drafts going and then get some content out regarding those. Maybe we can do a show on those because I think this is the time of year everybody loves the Dynasty rookie content. So got that kind of stuff coming, and then we'll have some anime cartoon donkey coming out with a preseason draft kit. So look forward to that stuff, Bobby. Thanks for having me on, man.
No, of course, man. Once again, make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com to check out all the great articles for baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. You can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. I want to thank my co-host once again, Donkey Teeth. Go follow him at Donkey Teeth 87. We are out of here, folks.